Australia's space agency officially opened, paving the way for Aussies in space. Perth gets a world-class robotics centre, joining forces with NASA and the SpaceX tourism plan by 2021. It's Tuesday, Feb 25, 2020. Let's talk some science.
Across Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts and YouTube, this is Talking Science with Dr. Brad Tucker and Matt Miller.
A very happy Tuesday to you, Dr. Brad Tucker.
How's it going?
Really good, my friend, really good. It's Tuesday once again. Another week flies by.
Yeah, that's right. They're flying faster than I can count, and I don't know if that's a good thing at any skill.
Well, we are keeping you busy as well. I believe you've got something on today, so you're joining us by phone today.
That's right. So, one of the things going on right now is there's workshops being held with the space agency on, what does NASA or Australia's involvement in the NASA Moon to Mars mission look like? So today's Canberra is one that a lot of us are attending to, and they've been going around Australia to make sure, the best plan for most of Australia is present, and we can make a big impact.
Well, as always, you can find Brad on the socials at btucker22 on Twitter, Dr. Brad Tucker on Facebook. I'm on Twitter at Miramat86. Search for Trekzone 2 wherever you get social, and don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to get the latest apps straight to your device. We're also now beaming fortnightly on spaceaustralia.com. A huge thanks to Rami and the team for having us. Alrighty, Brad, let's get into it.
Talking Science Headlines.
And kicking off the headlines this week, Brad, China is going to start testing for their new space station.
That's right. So they're looking at their new version of the Tiangong, or Heavenly Palace. So they'll be doing a launch with their new upgraded Long 5B rocket in April. So really trying to ramp up that activity to building their own, which they hope to start doing next year.
NASA's looking for the next astronaut applicants. Probably they've got the first class for the Artemis missions. These will be the next class.
That's right. So this would be kind of the Artemis Class 2 looking for. In the last round, I think they had 130,000 applicants. So give yourself a chance, but, you're competing against some good people, and obviously you have to be a U.S. citizen. That aside, they are planning, and they're doing the work to make it a reality.
And Starlink's DarkSat satellite test seemingly hasn't worked.
Yeah, there was a promise that their new lower albedo, so lower reflective surface satellites, wouldn't be as big of an impact in astronomy. And then when they were launched, everyone's like, these are still fairly bright. And then we were told to wait to their highest orbit. Now that they're in their final orbit, they appear as bright as some of the other stars in the sky. So definitely not really the impact at all that people are hoping. And it kind of brings the issue back to square one. And yet there's another 60 of them up there.
Talking Science Stories of the Week.
Alrighty, Brad, well, let's dive into the stories of the week, and let's stick close to home because, as you were saying there in the intro, Space Agency. It's all about the Space Agency, and it was officially launched by the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, last week.
Yeah, and this wasn't, the launch of any formal work. It was the launch of their headquarters, but it's an important milestone. Part of it is having a presence, a physical presence. Part of it has a dedicated building and those sorts of things. People think of going and visiting the iconic NASA places. That's the kind of thing that you want. And so it's another step in that right direction of making the Australian Space Agency a permanent fixture, not only in space in Australia, but internationally, and you have to start with a headquarters.
The brilliant thing about the Australian Space Agency is that they're really tackling this, much like NASA, and who spreads across the United States. Our space agency is going to be doing the same thing with looking at launch sites in Queensland. I believe there's a launch site looking at the Eyre Peninsula in South Australia. Perth getting a robotics centre. We'll talk about that in a second. And Adelaide being the headquarters. So it really is spreading the love across the country.
That's right. And we have the national test facilities here in Canberra and others, and that was always the goal. When there was a lot of debate about where the headquarters would go, a lot of us in the community were saying, well, that's actually not the important bit, because headquarters are good, you need them, you need a central focus, but again, in that NASA model, you specialize in different things. If you're really going to have an impact, you need groups to specialize in certain areas and not just try and do everything. And it was also to unite that capability. There were groups around Australia doing lots of great things, so you don't just have to replicate it or reproduce it in a different location. It's kind of making it a united front, so to speak, for overseas and international partners, which really the space agency is trying to do. And this building is one of those steps.
Let's focus on Perth now, because the Australian Space Agency, or ARSA, I think we have to come up with a better acronym. They've joined forces with NASA, and there's going to be a world-class robotics space centre launching there soon.
Yeah, this is kind of one of these things that we were just saying, where robotics is a big thing that we can play a role in, but also it's uniting the states themselves. So it's figuring out which areas of the states, both the universities in those states, but also the private industries in those states, can actually come together to focus. And again, WA is focusing on that robotics going into the mining and that sort of thing. Queensland touched on this as well. But, this is something we look at the Artemis missions and talks of asteroids and going to the moon and Mars. It is all about extraction of ice and other things on these places, and in very dry, desolate, harsh, remote conditions. And Australia does have an expertise. Some people think that it's all about just still people doing these things. A lot of these machines in these places are robotically driven. In the Pilbara in Australia, it's the longest and largest robotic train, remote driven train that they bring it from the mining site to the port. So those are the sorts of things that are directly needed, and NASA has clearly said we need to do this. So it's a way of making sure our efforts are fruitful.
Well, let's look abroad now for our last topic of the week. And SpaceX has signed a deal with a space tourism company, and they're going to be taking some private citizens as tourists into space next year.
Yeah, something that is going to happen pretty quickly. We talked about the news highlights when NASA gave the go-ahead to SpaceX to start sending their astronauts up after their latest round of abort tests and their rocket explosion. Well, not surprising, sure enough, turning around and saying, all right, well, we got the astronauts dealt with, let's start getting the private people up. You kind of knew this was where it's headed, and we knew it was going to happen, but they're very quick on the ball with what they want to do. But, it's another highlight that this idea of space tourism is purely in the here and now, and you can guarantee as soon as NASA astronauts start going up, SpaceX will start sending those private tourists up, and they're looking at for a launch next year.
Well, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe to Trekzone to catch the latest episodes, Trek and Orville screen caps and reviews, plus our Talkin' Science series now beaming out 4 days a week. Brad, thanks for talking science. We'll see you next week.
Thanks. Bye.